Okay, welcome. This is the Institute of Applied Psychology. My name's Gordon Young, and tonight's topic is self-sabotage. So, before we begin, let me introduce you to the team. So, Cromwell, do you want to take it from here?
Hello, this is Cromwell Salvatore from the Institute of Applied Psychologists. I just want to introduce you to the team. This is Grace, over here. This is Chris. Hello. And this is Brigida. Hi. So they're the team that's going to look after you guys and support you. I just want you to relax now, get comfortable, and enjoy the presentation. At the end of the presentation, feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Over to you, Gordon.
Thanks, Cromwell. So let's look at this. Do you self-sabotage? This is not a rhetorical question. My guess is yes. I don't know anyone who doesn't sometime. Do you have trouble sticking to a diet or an agreement or an effort, particularly agreement with yourself? Do you get in your own way? Do you frequently struggle with an internal conflict? So you want something, but you can't bring yourself to take the action to get there. If you are, you're not alone. Does part of you want to live a better life, and then part of you hinders your efforts? Here's the problem with this. Unless you learn how to do things differently, this is your life. Moving forward, it does not change. These patterns do not change. They're not you, but they are patterns that are learned, and you would have learned many of them before you were 8, 9, 10. So if your answer to any of these questions is yes, then please relax back and we'll discuss it. So the first thing I think you need to do is establish who I am. Otherwise, why the hell are you listening to me? My name's Gordon Young. I've been in the field. I've been a therapist for over 15 years now. I don't just teach. I'm not just a therapist in the clinical realm. I also teach as well. So I'll teach counsellors, psychologists, psychiatrists and the like, hypnosis skills that they can add on to their practice. And I teach people who are starting from scratch, people who are looking to create a new career for themselves. I also teach NLP training, which is very much about how do you take control of your internal frame? How do you start to be the master of your own domain? So I've been the president of a few different associations. I've been the journal editor of others. Probably the most important piece here, that if you're going to look at it and establish who I am and my credibility, which I think you should, is that I'm the only Australian NLP trainer, hypnosis trainer, who has been accepted into the Milton Erickson Foundation in Phoenix, Arizona. That is the pinnacle of not just hypnotherapy, but many would argue the pinnacle of psychotherapy in the world. It is the most prestigious, most respected school of its kind in the world. I recently went to a conference in December and run by the Milton Erickson Foundation. All the greats were there: Martin Seligman, Aaron Beck, Judith Beck, you name them. And they're all there for a hypnosis school, because over in the States, the world's very different. Hypnotherapy is very much respected because it's really at the top of the tree there. And there are 8,500 delegates there. It's the biggest conference of its kind in the world. So that's where I come from. The other thing you can look at here on this slide is that there was a leadership study done called 100 Leaders. It was the largest leadership study of its kind in Australia. In this field, I was chosen as the person they deemed to be the leader of the field. And so I was online with people like Steve Waugh, people who run large organizations in different fields and different professions. And in this field, I was one chosen. So here's my contention here. I think personal development, as well-intentioned as it has been, has actually perpetuated a number of myths that actually gets in the way of us being effective. It actually amplifies the problems we run. One of them, I think, is the whole concept of self-sabotage. So what is self-sabotage? Let's establish the definition before we kind of establish what we're actually talking about here. So according to Psychology Today magazine, behaviour is said to be self-sabotaging when it creates problems and interferes with long-standing goals. The most common self-sabotaging behaviours are procrastination, self-medication with drugs or alcohol, comfort eating, and forms of self-injury such as cutting. Now, every one of us has done one of these things somewhere, whether it's self-medication with drugs or alcohol or retail therapy or food or cigarettes or whatever else it is. We've done this somewhere. So where do people do it the most? Where does it have the most impact? In my experience, relationships. You can really seriously damage relationship with behavior that just doesn't serve. In your career, when it comes to money, or when it comes to weight or health management, those are the areas that most people struggle with a consistent effort. So let's look at career. It usually comes down to poor choices. If people are conflicted, one thing I see a lot of in my clinic and when I'm coaching is the imposter syndrome, where people feel like they are a complete imposter. Their external assessments can be great. Their quarterly reviews are excellent. But that doesn't change the way they're feeling about themselves. That doesn't change the way they view themselves. So they'll struggle to show up when pressured. They won't take that opportunity. They won't take that promotion because they don't think they could manage it from an emotional perspective or stress perspective. So this is a way you can definitely interfere with your own career. In relationships, it's a few different things because relationships, there's two factors to here. There's how you find a partner and then how you manage the relationship. If you have poor criteria for choosing a partner, everything else is kind of downhill from there. Here's the irony. Almost no one knows what their true criteria is for choosing a partner. If you're in a relationship and you start running obsessive behaviours or jealousy, or you start exposing fairly poor behaviour, neediness, whatever, too early, you can certainly sabotage a relationship. And your beliefs will be part of this. If you believe that you can't run a relationship or you can't stay in a relationship for any length of time, then you're more likely to run behaviour that supports that belief. We tend to be we live in accordance with our beliefs. They're the scripts of our lives. So your beliefs are actually a fairly important component to this. When it comes to money, the most obvious is just spending excessively, using credit cards, failure to save, using retail purchases as a therapy. This will tend to get you stuck. I've coached people who are on $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, and they can't hand out $1,500 at a time because they spend more than they earn. And most of it is in compensatory behavior to deal with the stress. And the weight mismanagement, breaking diets, failing to exercise, addictive behavior, things like sugar or various breads or whatever the things that they know they shouldn't be eating, they just get drawn to. So here's the problem. Self-sabotage is being portrayed as a deeply unconscious internal struggle. In the absence of understanding, people tend to resort to labeling their own behavior themselves rather than breaking down the behavior into its component parts. I'm here to tell you that everything's a process. But if you don't know what's actually going on for you, you will make mistakes. One of the trainers I've had, Dr. Michael Yabka, who's wrote the definition of depression for Encyclopedia Britannica, an American guy, he says there's two things that trip you up. Doesn't matter what they are, there's two things. What you don't know and what you think you know that isn't so. They're the things that trip you up. So what are the typical labels? Well, the idea that you have some sort of personality flaw, that you're inherently lazy or useless or unworthy in some way, that you are, your identity is you are a procrastinator. You make speculation. Maybe you don't love yourself enough to be successful, or that you have this saboteur within, this part of you that doesn't want you to succeed. And, the agenda that part of you runs is contrary to everything else that you want consciously. Another one is you start to label the fears. So people say, I fear success, or I fear getting outside of my comfort zone. I'm going to put to you that nobody fears success. That's just another one of these myths that people keep running. And the other point is that we keep hearing our own negative self-talk, and that actually hinders our actions. And that is true, but the presence of negative self-talk is not the issue. That's the key. The presence of negative self-talk is not the issue. Everyone has negative self-talk. So what can we do here? Well, the answers, the solutions people offer is to be kinder to yourself or to love yourself more. These are nice ideas. I just don't know what that means. I don't know how you love yourself more. The idea of going for a massage or a facial, and that's you addressing your self-esteem issues or your saboteur within, the truth is that's not going to do very much. That's like putting a Band-Aid on an artery. Ultimately, you've got to change the way you're thinking. You've got to change what you are doing, because life is about learning. When you learn to do things differently, everything changes. From my perspective, there is almost nothing that happens internally that you're not in charge of. If you think about it, it's logical, isn't it? There's no one else in charge of your thoughts or your feelings. And you have a range of different and conflicting thoughts and feelings. But the question then becomes, who chooses which thoughts and which feelings you pay attention to and which ones you ignore? Ultimately, it can only be you. Trouble is, we don't learn that. We're not taught that we're in control of whatever happens internally. And I'm here to tell you, you absolutely are. Now, telling you you're in charge doesn't really help if I don't show you how. Right? At the end of the day, there's got to be a how. Otherwise, it's just speculation. So in the courses that we teach, how is exactly what we're going to teach. So I'm going to say that self-sabotage is deeply misunderstood, even by therapists. I'm going to offer you a completely different perspective to what most people would say. So like everything, there is a process to doing self-sabotage. You have to do self-sabotage. It is not something that happens to you. You don't suffer from self-sabotage or from the inner saboteur. You have to do something to sabotage yourself. You have to listen to thoughts and feelings that don't serve you. Now, if you do that, you can never be consistent. If you listen to your feelings regularly, your feelings change moment by moment. We did an exercise in a class the other day, and we sat just for 10 minutes and I spoke. I told stories. And they were designed to generate different feelings at different times. And people were logging how many different noticeable feelings they had. In 10 minutes, some people had 27 different feelings that they could identify. You can't possibly honor and respond to every one of those 27 in 10 minutes. So the idea that you need to pay attention to everything that goes on inside your head, that is a myth and not a terribly useful one. I'm going to say to do self-sabotage, you have to run a certain physiology. You have to run a certain internal dialogue. You have to run certain negative thoughts. You have to hold tension in the body. There is a process by which you do this. And when you work it out and when you learn that you're actually in charge of that process, then the world changes. So here's the first myth, that you are somehow broken if you keep sabotaging yourself. Well, here's what I'm going to say to you. You are not broken, okay? The idea of being broken implies that you are unchangeable, there's something fatally flawed in you, it might be genetic, it might be a result of, child issues. I'm going to say that is so much crap. Park it. In essence, to be effective in life, you have to have a strong internal mechanism to decide which thoughts and feelings you listen to and which ones you just ignore. You have something like 60,000 thoughts a day. You can't listen to all of them. You can't attend to all of them. But the pivot point of your life comes down to the mechanism you use internally that decides, yes, I'm listening to this thought or I'm not. The reason why I'm talking to you now from an office is because I don't listen to every thought I ever have. If I did, I'd be in jail. I'd be wearing orange. And the people in jail, one of their problems is they've never learned to say to themselves, no, it's not worth it. Let it go. You know, we had a prison warden in one of our courses of a female prison, and she said, we actually have examples, when I was telling the story, we have examples of people who reoffend to get back in jail because they've heard that someone was dissing them in jail. Now, that is a very good example of someone who cannot let things go. That you might deem to be self-sabotaging behaviour. But what I'm going to say to you is, if you can't decide which thoughts and feelings are useful and which ones are not, you're going to go with whatever's loudest in your head. That's what you're going to do. And that does not serve. Every day, you'll have moments where you just don't feel like it. Well, the most effective people on the planet do things where they feel like it or not. And in essence, this is a cognitive skill. And most people don't learn it. The most effective people on the planet, they've got it. It makes them better at being in charge of their life because it doesn't matter what they feel. It doesn't matter what they tell themselves. If they have decided to take an action, to get up and go to the gym, to start a business and ride it through no matter what, whatever it is, they will do it whether they feel like it or not. That is a skill. So the pivot point of your life is that mechanism. Which thoughts and or feelings you pay attention to. Now, if you ever run anxiety, stress, overwhelm, anger, most of the time that is you not deciding consciously to use certain thoughts and not others. In essence, when you can't make that decision, when your emotions kick in and you have trouble staying present, when you have trouble stepping away from a thought or a position because your feelings are so strong, then you are no longer deciding consciously which thoughts or feelings to pay attention to. You're going with your gut. You're going with those feelings again. And that is a learnt behaviour. And the truth is, most people on the planet don't have another option. What stops people is consequence. You can get very angry, but if the person's 2 meters tall and 140 kilos of solid muscle, you probably find a way of calming down. But most of the time, the consequence is not that obvious, not that immediate. So I'm going to say to you that if you listen to your feelings regularly, you cannot sustain effort. Any goal you've got that takes any length of time, and if you're setting goals, if you've got a coach or you want to improve your life, most of us are pretty good at short-term goals. A short-term goal is, I think I'll have Thai for dinner tonight. That's not exactly a stretch. But to decide for the next 3 months, I'm going to only eat this, or I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week, or whatever else it is. If you listen to your feelings, you're not going to persist. You can't. You will give yourself reasons. Oh, it's a bit wet today. It's cold. I don't want to get up too early. I stayed up late last night. You'll give yourself reasons. But if you just decide, it doesn't matter what I'm thinking or feeling, I've already made this commitment, so I will do it, then you've got a chance. If you want to do anything that is going to give you a legacy in this world, you must decide to take action whether you feel like it or not. If you want to write a book and you only want to write it when you feel like it, then I can tell you now that book will never get written. So ultimately, this is a skill that most people don't have. The second myth is that people who are effective do not have those negative voices or that self-criticism or that doubt. I'm going to say, yes, they do. They just don't listen to it as much as the average person does. That's really the distinction. Throughout my years, I have worked with some of the most effective people on the planet, whether they're Olympic athletes, world champions, CEOs of large organizations. Right now, we're bringing someone on board onto our faculty. Their business that they are the CEO of in Australia, worldwide, they do $5 billion a month. A month. And ultimately, what is common amongst all these people is that they choose. They don't decide just based on feeling. They step back and they review. They get an objective view. They have the ability to not get caught up in the drama of it all. They actually step back. So a lot of people who struggle with these things just assume that effective people just don't have that problem. They do. They just don't listen. So let's talk about avoidance for a moment. Another factor, and there are many, right? I'm not going to say it's only one thing, but if you lean towards something called avoidance coping style, an avoidance coping style is where you tend to ruminate, that is, think about things a lot, but don't always take a lot of action. So something happens at work, you don't go and deal with it. You come home and you complain to your partner about it. And you do that regularly, but that doesn't solve the problem. Or you come home and you hook up with your two best friends, Ben and Jerry, and you decide to eat a tub of ice cream because that makes you feel better about the problem at work. But the truth is that doesn't change the problem at work. This is called avoidant behavior. When you run avoidance, you tend to only focus on making yourself more comfortable about the problem. You're not dealing with the problem. You don't want to go and tackle it head on. And a lot of time this will come down to things like, struggling with conflict resolution. You may not be good at confrontation, so you just don't want to go near it. So you come home and you have a drink, or you eat too much, or you sit down and have, half a pack of cigarettes. There are different things people do to placate the stress levels within them. This is avoidance. People who are avoidant also tend to think that thinking about something is doing something, that it's attending to the issue. Unless your thoughts lead you to an action or a conclusion, they are not useful. So there's a distinction between useful analysis and over-analysis. If you lean towards avoidance, you will run over-analysis. You'll think way too much about stuff, but in the end, not do enough. Then there's another component to this. There's also something called an approach avoidance conflict, and this can also get people stuck. So an approach avoidance conflict, let me give you an example. It's where your values are conflicting. So for instance, you might have a goal to be wealthy, and a part of you wants to be wealthy, and another part of you tells you that wealthy people are arrogant. Well, you don't want to be arrogant, so now you're conflicted. If you're conflicted, you're likely to do very little towards that goal. You'll talk about it a lot. You'll plan a lot, but you won't do much because you have not resolved the internal conflict. A good coach should be looking for these approach avoidance conflicts. If they know anything about NLP, particularly strategic coaching, then they'll be looking for those off the bat. So when you've got conflicting evidence or conflicting agendas, what's most likely to happen is you just won't move very far. Again, this is not you being broken. This is not you having a saboteur, as if there's some unconscious part of you that just hates success. No one hates success. Okay, you don't fear success. You fear having a greater fall. if you get up there. And then everyone's saying, I knew it all along. That's what you fear. Or you fear the cost of success, whether it's going to cost your family time or friends or whatever. That's what you fear, is the cost, not success itself. I think it's one of the big, really debilitating myths of the personal development field, is that people can fear success. You don't fear having more money in the bank. And in fact, most people, when they don't like money or don't like wealth, the truth is what you don't like is not wealth. You don't like ostentation. You don't like people flaunting it in your face and making you feel inferior because they got more of it. So you don't have to be ostentatious. You can have money in the bank and no one can know about it. Money in the bank gives you choices. That's it. And when you never have money in the bank because you keep finding ways of offsetting it, then you're causing yourself more conflict. So we've got a few minutes to have a further discussion. I am interested in hearing what questions you have, because ultimately how this relates to you is really important. I can talk about it generally, but how does this relate to you? So, Cromwell, what questions do we have?
Okay. We have a question from Emma. How can I start self-sabotaging myself going to the gym and ruining my weight loss?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that kick in here. If I was coaching you, Emma, I'd be looking at what your values are. Do you value health? Do you value fitness? If it's not in your top 4 or 5 values, it's probably never going to happen. But your values are malleable, like your beliefs are. I don't know if you believe that you can get fit or healthy. If you've had chronic weight issues for a while, and I don't know what your situation is, but the longer you've had a weight problem, the more we tend to believe in something called a stable attribution style. That is where you believe things cannot be changed. So if you run a belief that things can't change, or at least they can't change fast enough, your efforts will be diluted. If you can't see an outcome quickly, then you've got to be able to keep staying with the process no matter what. You don't go to the gym and by the end of the session see a difference, right? No one gets that. As a result, if you're relying on seeing a difference for 30 minutes of workout, you will never continue. So the truth is, for things like weight loss or health or even money, the truth is you need to keep going without seeing any outcome. You have to have faith in the process that no matter what, you will get the outcome if you just continue with the process. Now, the other thing about that, of course, is you've got to start listening to the thoughts and feelings that support you in that outcome. If you keep listening to the wrong thoughts and feelings, you'll never get the outcome. So let me give you a bit of a clue here. The truth is, to change all of this, there's no magic wand or magic bullet here. It's about changing your conditioning. And you have a much better chance if you do, say, like an NLP training where you spend 8 days reviewing and interrupting and disconnecting some of these things that hold you together and hold the problem together. Just do a one-off exercise like I'm about to do is not going to make a lot of difference, but I just want to demonstrate how much more control you have than you think you do. So if you could get the voice, and for all of you, if you can get the voice that kind of you think sabotages you. I'm going to ask you some weird questions, but just assess them. Where does it come from? Is it behind the temples? Is it behind the middle? Is it the middle of the head, the back? Is it down here in the chest or the stomach? Some people it comes from down there. Just notice it. Now make it louder and more vitriolic. If you can do that, that's great. Because here's what that shows me. You're in charge of it. So now move it to another part of the head. Move it to the left, move it to the right, your choice. Move it onto a shoulder and just hear it in the one ear. Don't change what it's saying, just hear it in one ear. Now give it a slightly different accent, one that's a little bit more absurd. If you can do that, what you are now demonstrating is that you are in charge of that voice. And there's the first part is awareness. You've got to be aware that you are the master of your own internal domain. No one else runs it but you. If your life is a movie, then you are Steven Spielberg. You're the one who chooses the casting, the director, the actors, everyone, the scenery. You're the one who chooses it. The idea that you don't choose is one of the starting points of you never having the life you want. Ultimately, the life you want comes out of you taking charge of as much as you can. That's not you becoming a control freak. That's you just recognizing these are things I can control. And the truth is you don't get to control anything outside of it. You can influence it, and the more influential you are, the better your communication skills are, the more you can influence. But internally, I'm not going to say you control every random thought, but you do control the thoughts and feelings you attend to, the ones you give airtime to, and those are the ones that determine your life. You might have heard of the Buddha talk about you are what you most often think. Ultimately, the most common thoughts that run through your head will have a significant impact on your life because they determine your behavior. If your behavior leans towards taking no action, sucking it up, just wearing it, it doesn't help. So ultimately, the first step is to know that you're actually in charge. So that self-awareness piece is the beginning. Then it's a case of being able to develop exercises, which are standard NLP, and certainly my course anyway, of turning your voice off, of choosing to develop a better mechanism to choose which thoughts and feelings you pay attention to. And here's another quick little tip. If you don't feel like taking an action, that's okay. Ignore how you're feeling now. Focus on the feeling of having taken the action and what that will feel like. So transfer from now into the future. What will it feel like if I do get up and go to the gym? What will I feel like after the workout? What will that be like? Or, if you want to go to the negative, go in the future and see that you didn't bother. And how will you feel about it then? It moves you away from the here and now and gives you the fork in the road. Which way do you want to go? So I'm going to say, Emma, I believe, recognize you're in charge. That's the first step. I'm going to say the most effective people on the planet, if you think about an Olympic athlete, and I've worked with a number of them now, if they say they're going to do something, they just do it, hell or high water. No matter what, it gets done. One of the swimmers who worked with us, Jeff Hugel, for 10 years, from the time of 11 until the time he was 21, he swam or trained every day except Good Friday and Christmas Day for 10 years solid, minimum 5 hours a day. And if he didn't, he knew the East Germans would be, or the Americans would be. So ultimately, there was consequence, and then there was the carrot, which was he was doing it all to win Olympic gold, to be amongst the best in the world. You don't get to be the best in the world by just doing the bare minimum, by just doing things when you feel like it. That's not how it works. So ultimately, if you want to have different outcomes, you have to start thinking differently. If you don't know how to do that, then that's saying you can certainly come and learn with us. And it is a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It's turning around the entire conditioning process that you've had. If you didn't have ideal parenting, how many people did, then you've got to reparent yourself. As an adult, you can decide, this is who I will be. From now on, I get to decide who I will be and how I will be in the world. And my past has nothing to do with it. That's the first position I would encourage you to take. Cromwell, is there another?
Yes, we have a question from Diane. How do I stop self-sabotage after a breakup from a narcissistic partner? I've been told it takes 2 years. Is there a time frame for dealing with self-sabotage?
Okay. I'm going to say most of what you've been told, there's a psychological term for it. What is it? Oh, that's right. Is crap. Right? I mean, it doesn't take 2 years. You know what it takes is a decision. Right? Time makes the decision easier. There's no doubt about it. For the average person who's not training their mind in any particular way. However, when you decide enough, I'm not grieving this anymore. I'm not going to be grudged them anything. Whatever else it is, you're not stalking them on Facebook anymore. Whatever you're doing, that comes with a decision. Now, that decision can be made 3 days later or 2 years later. You can decide anytime. Because in that moment, you get to decide who you're going to be. Here's the thing about relationships. Sorry, what was the name? Diane?
Yes.
Diane. There's 2 aspects to relationship. There's your search criteria. Who do you draw to you? In fact, people talk about, I always attract the wrong guys. No, you choose the wrong guys. Right? A lot of other people were probably attracted to you as well, but you didn't choose them. You chose a guy that probably supports some process that you're running. So here's the criteria that I most often hear in my clinic when I'm dealing with women who just can't find the right partner for them. The number one and almost exclusive criteria they have is how he made me feel. Now, there's some problems with that. First of all, do we want the person that we're with as a life partner to make us feel something? Well, technically, they don't make you feel anything. You make yourself feel that. But yes, do you want to have a connection and some sort of strong feeling there? Yes. But if it's the only criteria, if you ignored other criteria, e.g., does he have a job? What's he like? What are his friends like? What's he like with his family? How does he treat, wait staff or customer service people? Is he rude and arrogant? Is he patient? How does he treat his mother? Because how he treats his mother at some point is going to be how he treats you. So my guess is if you lean towards being a you-centered person, as in you like to give, finding someone who's an I-centered person, narcissism would be the extreme end of that, it's happy days for both of you, but it will all end in tears. So unfortunately, most of the time, our search criteria is quite unconscious to us. It's usually about the same search criteria we had when we were 17 or 18. Now, I don't know how old you are now, but ultimately, I'm going to say, if you're looking for a life partner that you're going to hook your finances up to, that you're going to rely on if you want to start a family, so they're going to have to carry all the financials, someone who's going to be there for you emotionally, and at the same time be there to help you be better. For me, a relationship worth having is only worth having if it significantly adds to your life. Let me say that again. A relationship is only worth having if it significantly adds to your life. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing? Now you're encumbered and you don't have other choices and you're not even getting what you want anyway. And there's another piece here, yeah. And again, I don't know if I'm just talking off the cuff or whether it relates to you. I don't know. But one thing I heard once and it really resonated for me. If you want your life to be a life worth sharing, then make it worth sharing. Don't wait for a partner to come along and then you're going to start doing interesting things. If you want to share your life, make it worth sharing. I'm going to say you need to be happy with who you are. There's a starting point. And then if someone else wants to come into a life that you've got going and it's busy and it's interesting and it's entertaining and they want to join you, great. But if that's not the case, and what you want most of a relationship is emotional support, That is the avoidance frame again. So if what you want is a shoulder to cry on or someone to support you in some way, that's the dominant factor. Lots of people will promise that, but you'll pay a price for that. You pay a price for having a rescuer or a parent as a partner. So you don't need to wait 2 years. What you need to do is change your criteria. You need to change the way you are searching. And that's not an easy thing to do consciously. Is it changeable? Yes, it is. But it'll require more than a few hours of effort. You'll need to really pursue that. Is it going to take years? No, it's going to take, days. Your situation is a very common one. I wish I had $1 for every time I heard there's no decent men in the city. They're either gay or married. Actually, I do have $1 for each one of those because they came into the clinic. But ultimately, the answer is that's the wrong way of approaching this. Right? There's more than one person out there for everyone. The question is, how do you determine which one's which? If you can't make the distinction, then you're a little bit stuck. So let it go. I don't know where you are, but if there's a window right next to you or somewhere near you, walk over to it, Diane, open the window and shout out, next. That's what you need, because no one's worth your time. No one who's hurt you. Here's the lesson, and this is the lesson most people get wrong. They get hurt in a relationship, and then they say, well, I'm going to stay away from men. I'm going to stay away from women. Men are. And that's called a globalization. The moment you generalize the lesson from that man to all men, you are in the wrong game. That is not valid. To say that man should not be part of my life, that's a valid statement probably. But no man, no, that's not it. And that's going to get you messed up. That's what's going to make it 2 years. In the end, that person is not someone you can trust. But here's the real problem, dear. Your problem is because without getting some external support. The problem is that you don't actually trust yourself. It's not the man, it's you. You don't trust your ability to make the choice, to make the distinction between who you can trust and who you can't. Therein lies the real problem. So you've got to do some work on yourself, is what I would say. This is not you, it's just a pattern that you've learned. You probably have girlfriends doing the same thing. Maybe your mum did the same thing. I don't know. You've got it from somewhere. You didn't create it all by yourself. So you've learned along the way. And I'm going to say it's one of the biggest issues I deal with, either in clinic or in the trainings that I run. It's your mid-30s, still struggling, can't work out why they're still single and caught up. And I see that so often. And it doesn't have to be. Okay, that was my long-winded rant in response to that question. Anything else?
That's pretty much a wrap up. There's one more question here, but I guess we would like to invite everybody that is listening here now. Feel free to call Grace, Chris, and Brigitte if you have any questions about your hypnotherapy course here at the Institute of Applied Psychology. But for now, that's a wrap up for me. How about you, Gordon?
Yeah, I'd just like to say there's a couple of factors here. You can do some personal development courses. They will also support you in becoming the therapist you want to be as well. But one of the big things that gets in the way of therapists being decent is their own stuff that doesn't get resolved. I'm going to say most therapists don't mess up because they can't do a technique. They mess up because their own stuff, quote unquote, their own biases get in the way. And if you want to be a therapist, that means you need to step up to being a person who has got their head around most things. That's what that is about. You can't operate at the same logical level that the person who's your client is working on. So it's an opportunity for you to clean up your own backyard as well. So there's a bunch of different things or ways we can do that. But that would be the biggest sticking point for most therapists, even ones who've been there for 20 years. That's what I see the most, especially when I'm teaching within you know, in an association or some other place. You can actually, the conflicts within them are palpable, and you want to be clean of all that, and you can be. Okay, so thank you all for listening. I appreciate your attendance, and certainly if there's a discussion to be had, talk to us. It doesn't cost you anything, it's free, and we may be the pivot point in your life. You know, if you don't change anything, then your past will equal your future. That's just the reality of it. It's not there to scare you. That's just how the reality was. I made a massive change in my life in order to be here now. It wasn't my intention, but I made some massive changes because I kind of had to. And here I am. Well, you can do that too. And here's the thing, it's not scary. It's exciting. So I wish you all well. And Crom, if you can sign it off, that would be fantastic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.